No negotiations. That's what Beijing keeps shouting. No talks, no deals, no compromise, but behind closed doors. A very different story. While Chinese state media repeats the same script, we will fight to the end. Something strange is happening at the U.S. Treasury building in Washington, D.C. Cameras catch a group of Chinese officials sneaking in early morning. No press, no announcements, just 10 nervous faces flashing G20 badges, avoiding eye contact, demanding photographers delete the evidence. And at the very same moment, Trump tells reporters, "They called me. They're trying to make a deal. So who's lying? And why? If everything is so strong, if the Chinese economy is so resilient, why are they begging behind the scenes while screaming tough on TV?" Today, we tear off the mask and expose the double face of Beijing's hardline bluff. Beijing keeps saying it loud and clear. There are no negotiations with the United States. On April 24th, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs told the world, no talks, no consultations, no deals. The Ministry of Commerce backed it up the next day. Any reports about progress in China-US trade talks are completely baseless. And the Chinese embassy in Washington? Same line, same script, same denial. So case closed, right? Except no, because just hours after those statements, South Korean reporters caught something Beijing didn't want the world to see. A senior delegation from China's Ministry of Finance, 10 officials in total, quietly slipped into the U.S. Treasury headquarters. Early morning, unannounced, wearing G20 badges to avoid attention. When journalists tried to snap a photo, the Chinese officials panicked. One shouted at the cameraman, demanded the photo be deleted on the spot. Another refused to give his name, looking down, eyes darting away from the lens. If these men were simply attending a G20 event, why the secrecy? Why the fear of being seen? And here's where it gets worse for Beijing's story. At the very same moment those officials were sneaking into the Treasury building, President Trump was standing in front of reporters, saying the opposite of what China claimed. "We are actively negotiating with China," Trump said. "Talks are going smoothly." He even went further. In an interview with Time magazine on April 25th, Trump revealed, "The pancake chef called me personally. They're asking to make a deal. It's all there. The place, the time, the call. The story lines up, and it directly exposes the lie." While Beijing keeps telling their own people, "We are standing strong. No talks, no surrender." Their negotiators are sitting quietly across the table in Washington, looking for a way out. Because the truth is, they don't have a choice. The U.S. is still China's #1 export market. Over $524 billion in goods shipped from China to America last year alone. Nearly 20% of China's entire export economy depends on that pipeline. And now, Trump's 145% tariffs are cutting that pipeline in half. Container bookings from China to the U.S. have dropped by over 60%. Factory closures are hitting the coastal provinces hard. Bankruptcy rates for small and mid-sized manufacturers in Guangdong and Zhejiang have soared to 30%. Unemployment? Rising fast. The government claims it's only 5.3%. But on the ground, workers aren't getting paid. Factories aren't hiring. Protests are spreading. Even Beijing's so-called GDP growth, officially listed at 5.4% this quarter, doesn't match what's really happening. Tax revenues are down 5.3%. If the economy is growing, why is the government collecting less money? The numbers don't lie, but Beijing does. Because what the Chinese Communist Party fears most is not Trump's tariffs. It's their own people finding out the truth. If the workers, if the small business owners, if the middle class realize that their leaders are bluffing on TV while begging for mercy behind the scenes, the damage won't stop at the ports. It will spread straight into the heart of the regime. So they lie. No talks, they say. Stay calm. Trust us. But the facts are out. The photos are out. The leaks are out. And Beijing's double face? Exposed for the world to see. Why keep lying? Why deny the talk so aggressively, even as their own officials sneak into Washington behind closed doors? Because for Beijing, this was never just about tariffs. This was never just about trade. This is about survival. The Communist Party has built its power on two pillars: economic growth and national pride. The Great Revival of the Chinese nation. The rise of China as a global superpower. The world's factory that no one can replace. But what happens when the engine breaks down? What happens when that world factory stops moving? You see, this isn't the first time Beijing has faced pressure from Washington. But this time, the timing couldn't be worse. The economy is already bleeding. Foreign direct investment into China has dropped nearly 20%, the sharpest decline in decades. Manufacturing orders are evaporating. Factory bankruptcies are piling up. Young graduates can't find jobs. Housing prices are falling. And with nearly 70% of household wealth tied up in real estate, the middle class is feeling the squeeze. Add to that the 145% tariff wall Trump just slammed down. It's not just a trade fight, it's a chokehold, and Beijing knows it. But here's the problem: they can't admit that. Because if the government says, "We're negotiating with the Americans because we can't survive this on our own," the entire illusion of strength shatters. The nationalist wolf warrior diplomacy? Dead. The image of China as untouchable? Gone. And the risk? Massive. Because China's leadership isn't elected. It rules by narrative. It rules by control. It rules by convincing the people that the party is always right, always strong, always in command. Admitting weakness means admitting failure. And failure, in the eyes of the Chinese middle class and working class, means betrayal. That's why they deny the talks. That's why they censor the footage of protests outside shuttered factories. That's why they block the South Korean media report about the Treasury meetings. That's why they label Trump's statements as rumors and fabrications, even though the timeline and the evidence say otherwise. Because the biggest fear in Zhongnanhai right now isn't Trump. It's the people inside China asking the one question the party can't answer. If we're winning, why are we bleeding? If we're so strong, why are the jobs gone? Beijing's entire strategy is built on keeping that question off the table. So they double down. No talks. No problem. Everything under control. But you can only hold the line for so long when the walls are already cracking. The unemployment lines are growing. The bankruptcies are spreading. Tax revenues are falling. And investors are walking away. Meanwhile, their number one customer, the United States, is closing the door. The export surplus with America stands at $361 billion. That surplus isn't a bonus. It's the lifeline, the core cash flow that keeps factories running, that keeps workers paid, that keeps social stability intact. When Trump squeezes that line shut, Beijing doesn't have many options. Negotiate? Yes, quietly, secretly, desperately. But admit it? Never. Because the moment they admit it, the mask falls. And the people who've been told for years that the party is invincible will see what's really behind the curtain. Not strength, not confidence, but fear. Fear of collapse. Fear of losing control. Fear of facing the very people they've lied to. That's why they keep the lie alive. Because for Beijing, the truth is more dangerous than the tariffs themselves. Beijing can shout all it wants. But numbers don't lie. The Chinese economy is trapped. The export machine, the very heart of China's rise, is bleeding out. And no amount of tough talk from state media can hide it. Take a step back and look at the big picture. China's so-called growth miracle was never magic. It was a formula. High-volume, low-cost manufacturing, shipped out to the world's biggest consumer, the United States. America buys. China builds. Factories run. Workers get paid. But what happens when America stops buying? The formula breaks. And now that break is everywhere. Trump's 145% tariffs didn't just tax Chinese goods. They exposed how vulnerable the entire system really is. In April alone, container bookings from China to the US dropped by over 60%. Sea intelligence data confirms nearly 400,000 containers were cut from the shipping schedules on Asia, North America routes in just 4 weeks. That's not a slowdown. That's a shutdown. Port of Los Angeles, reporting a 1/3 drop in Chinese arrivals. Cathay Pacific, Air freight demand from China down 30%. The pipelines are closing, but the bills aren't. Factory owners still owe wages, still owe rent, still owe payments to suppliers. The assembly lines were designed for speed, not flexibility. You can't just flip a switch and start making products for another market. The molds, the machines, the contracts, they're all locked into US demand. And Beijing knows it. That's why they're scrambling. Vietnam's exports to the US are up 25%. India is winning smartphone assembly contracts. Mexico's maquiladoras are reporting record orders. The world is adapting, fast. But China? Stuck, because no other market can replace America overnight. The European Union? Slow growth, heavy regulations. Africa? Still developing. Southeast Asia? Growing but nowhere near the scale. The American consumer was the engine, and now that engine is gone. Inside China, small and mid-sized manufacturers are collapsing. Bankruptcy rates in Guangdong and Zhejiang are now at 30%. Workers are being laid off quietly. Dormitories are emptying out. Gig work, food delivery, ride-hailing is the last refuge for millions of displaced laborers. The government says unemployment is just 5.3%. But on the streets, the lines outside job centers keep getting longer. And here's the part Beijing doesn't want to admit. Even the official GDP numbers don't add up. First quarter growth is listed at 5.4%. But tax revenues? Down 5.3%. How does an economy grow while the government collects less money? Doesn't. This is the math of denial. The propaganda machine keeps spinning. Resilience, strength, recovery on track. But inside the factories, the owners aren't buying it. The suppliers aren't buying it. The workers certainly aren't buying it. In fact, many of them are selling off equipment, clearing out inventory at a loss. Anything to stay afloat just one more month. And the leadership in Beijing, watching it all unfold, while telling the people, stay calm, we are strong. But strength doesn't look like this. Strength doesn't mean sneaking into Washington at dawn, hoping no one notices. Strength doesn't mean begging for tariff relief while denying the talks ever happened. The truth is brutal. China's export economy is locked in a trap of its own making, and that trap has no easy exit. Because to admit the need for negotiation would be to admit the system is broken. But without negotiation, the system keeps bleeding. The very success that built modern China, the factories, the ports, the export chain, is now the cage that holds them hostage. Trump knew exactly where the weak spot was. And now, Beijing knows it too. That's why they're at the table. Not because they want to be, because they have to be. Because when the factory lights go dark, and the workers go home unpaid, and the cash flow stops, the slogans aren't enough. The system doesn't run on pride. It runs on orders, on shipments, on revenue, and right now, the orders are gone. The shipments are stalled. The revenue is bleeding out. And Beijing's so-called hardline stance? It's just a mask covering quiet desperation. Beijing's official line is clear. No talks. We're standing strong. America will break before we do. But inside China, people are starting to ask questions. Because no matter how loud the slogans get, they can't cover up the reality on the ground. The factories are closing. The orders are gone. The jobs are disappearing. And the middle class, the very people Beijing relies on to keep the social contract stable, are feeling the pain. These are not the poor, the marginalized, or the forgotten. These are the upwardly mobile, the educated, the families who bought into the dream. Work hard, play by the rules, save, invest in real estate, send their kids to good schools, trust the system. But the system is cracking. 70% of Chinese household wealth is tied up in real estate. But home prices in major cities like Beijing and Shanghai are down more than 20%. Nationwide, prices have fallen 15% on average. The big developers, Evergrande, Country Garden, are defaulting on debts. Projects are stalled. Prepaid apartments are sitting unfinished. Families are watching their life savings evaporate into concrete skeletons. Meanwhile, job security, the one thing that made people believe in the system, is disintegrating. Youth unemployment is breaking records. Millions of graduates are entering the labor force with nowhere to go. Factory layoffs keep climbing. Freelancers and gig workers flood the streets. The government keeps reporting unemployment at 5.3%. But no one believes it. Not when the dormitories are half empty. Not when delivery drivers are fighting for scraps. Not when workers are standing outside shuttered factories, holding signs that read, "Pay US what you owe WE." The anger is real, and it's spreading, because people are connecting the dots. They hear the government say no talks, but they see the footage of Chinese officials sneaking into the US Treasury. They hear the promises of strength, but they watch Trump, standing on American soil, telling reporters, "They called me. They're asking for a deal." And the question grows louder in every dorm room, every coffee shop, every WeChat group that hasn't been censored yet. If we're so strong, why are we begging behind the scenes? This is what Beijing fears most. It's not the tariffs. It's not Trump. It's the moment the middle class stops believing. Because the foundation of Communist Party control isn't just police and propaganda. It's trust. Trust that the party knows what it's doing. Trust that the system works. Trust that, if you keep your head down and stay loyal, life will get better. But when the jobs vanish, when the paychecks stop, when the home you saved for never gets finished, trust crumbles. The system was never built for a crisis of confidence. And right now, confidence is breaking. Investors are pulling out. Factories are collapsing. Workers are protesting. But the real crack, the one Beijing can't fix with censorship, is happening inside the hearts of the people who once believed. The middle class is watching, listening, asking questions. And once those questions start, they don't stop. They lead to bigger questions. If the government lied about the talks, what else are they lying about? If the economy isn't as strong as they claim, what happens next? If the party isn't invincible, who's really in control? These are the thoughts Beijing fears more than any protest, more than any tariff. Because when faith in the system dies with it. That's why they double down on denial. No talks. Stay calm. Trust us. But every shuttered factory, every unpaid worker, every unfinished apartment screams the opposite. And the middle class hears it. They hear it in the silence of closed factories. They hear it in the echo of protests spreading across industrial zones. They hear it in the quiet resignation of neighbors packing up and moving back to the countryside. And they start asking themselves, if the system is this broken, if the party is this desperate, how much longer can the lie hold? It's not just the workers who see through the lie. The investors see it too. The so-called Great Chinese Recovery, the comeback story Beijing keeps selling to the world, is falling apart. And the people who move money for a living are not buying it. You can't fool the markets. You can shout resilience on state TV. You can run headlines about stability and growth targets met. But the data always tells the truth. And right now, the data is screaming. Foreign direct investment into China has dropped by nearly 20%, the lowest level since the boom days of the 1990s. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's decision after decision, boardroom after boardroom, fund after fund quietly stepping back. Vanguard, BlackRock, Fidelity, major investment houses are cutting their China exposure, trimming positions, reallocating capital to Vietnam, India, Mexico. Because the smart money knows. They know the factories are closing. They know the orders are gone. They know the government is lying about the talks because it has no choice. And the investors, the ones who don't need the propaganda to make decisions, are voting with their feet. You won't see it on the front page of the People's Daily. But inside global trading floors, the sentiment has flipped. China is no longer the safe bet. It's the risk. It's the headache. It's the place where you wake up one morning to find your partner factory bankrupt, your supply chain frozen, your investment trapped behind a wall of political denial. One senior portfolio manager in Singapore told the Financial Times, "We've moved China from Plan A to Plan C, only if we have no other option." Another logistics executive leaked to Bloomberg, "Orders out of Vietnam are surging. No one wants to get stuck in China if this thing escalates. And it is escalating. Trump's 145% tariffs were never just about tax rates. They were a signal, a trigger, a line drawn in the sand, told the world, the game has changed. The American market, the customer that built China's factory dominance, is walking away. And with it, the cash flow that kept the machine alive. Shipping data confirms it. Container bookings down 60%. Air freight collapsing by 30%. Port of Los Angeles reporting a 1/3 drop in Chinese arrivals. Meanwhile, Vietnam's exports to the US are up 25%. India is winning smartphone assembly contracts once locked to Chinese plants. Mexico's manufacturing zones are expanding faster than ever. The supply chains are moving. The capital is moving. The trust is moving. But Beijing is stuck. Because their strategy was never built for flexibility. It was built on the assumption that America would always need them. That they could always call the shots. That the world had no other choice. That assumption is now dead. And Wall Street sees it. Investors don't care about slogans. They care about stability, predictability, return on investment. What they see today is a country pretending to be strong while begging behind the scenes. A leadership clinging to denial because admitting the truth would shatter their grip on power. And they're not waiting around to see how bad it gets. The exodus has begun. Money doesn't stay where it isn't safe. And right now, China isn't safe. Not for supply chains. Not for manufacturing. Not for investment. The foreign brands still operating inside China are hedging their bets. Dual sourcing, diversifying suppliers, preparing contingency plans. Because the writing is on the wall. Beijing's tough talk? A smokescreen. Their secret Treasury meetings? A confession. The investors understand exactly what's happening. They know what Beijing won't say out loud. That the system is running out of options. That the middle class is losing faith. That the numbers are breaking through the propaganda. And they're acting accordingly. The smart money always moves first. And this time, it's moving fast. The question isn't whether foreign capital will keep flowing into China. The question is how much of it is already gone, and how many more will follow. Because in the world of global finance, no one wants to be the last one out the door. No talks, they keep saying, but the photos are out. The leaks are confirmed. The numbers don't lie. Behind the tough words and the nationalist slogans, Beijing is sitting quietly at the table. Not because they want to, but because they have to. The tariffs are working. The economy is bleeding. The middle class is asking questions the party cannot answer. And Wall Street, already walking away. This isn't just about trade anymore. It's about survival. So here's the question. How long can the Communist Party keep the lie alive before their own people demand the truth? Drop your thoughts below. And stay tuned, because the next chapter in this collapse is already unfolding.